it's okay for you, it's safe for you to like let those things go and just connect. Welcome back to the Diaries of a Witch podcast. My name is Angelica Crashi, and today we are going to talk all about connecting on a deeper level with your deities and how to like forge deeper connections overall or like as your relationship develops. I talk a lot about deity work, both in the podcast, on Instagram, like in all of my content. I talk a lot about deity work. It is something that when I first came into paganism, I mean, it's obviously, intimately related to paganism and theurgy in general. But it was something like when I first got into paganism and witchcraft and just like all of this stuff that I love and now talk about on the internet for a living. All of these things, like when I started to get into them, I was so interested in deity work. It was like my number one goal of wanting to connect and like coexist essentially with the deities, with any deity. Well, maybe not any deity, because I definitely and still am kind of selective about who I connect with, just because I prefer to have like more closer, deeper relationships than a ton of like smaller connections. I think as I get older and as I expand in my practice, I do a lot of planetary magic now, and so I work with the deities that are correlated to the planets, like the Greek and Roman deities correlated to the names of the planets for different planetary magic purposes. I kind of like have a lot of ways that I work with deities on a more casual level or sort of on a more like purely like thaumaturgical like level, right? Spell work level, magical level. And then I have the deities that I am like intimately connected with, right? So I have my patron Hades, who, not everybody resonates with a matron patron like scheme. It's basically what it is, if you've never heard of it, is it's kind of this idea that there's one deity that is like your father in the cosmos, right? And then there's a separate deity that is kind of like your cosmic mother in a way. Some people have multiple patrons and matrons. Some people feel a really deep connection to just a patron and whatnot, versus, having both. Some people don't work with this at all. Some people believe or feel like there's a certain deity that really supports them and they are devoted to that deity, and they maybe feel like they have kind of a parental relationship with that deity, but they won't use those terms. So anyway, I just use them because it's kind of something I feel like I've always done in terms of referencing Hades and my deeper relationships with Hades and then my matron deity, who I don't really talk about online. I like to keep her identity secret. So she exists, but I just don't talk about her. Let's dive a little bit deeper into how we can actionably start to improve our connection to these deities. There's so many ways we can do this, and there's like so many like even like micro goals. Like, do you want to personalize your relationship with your deity more? Do you feel like your personal relationship is lacking? Are you relying a lot on like books and other devotees like advice about how to interact with this deity, which is totally fine, but I think sometimes there's a point in the relationship where you're almost having to put in a little bit of your own gnosis, your own experience, and working off and growing the relationship based off of that. So maybe that is kind of where you're at in terms of personalization. Maybe where you're at is you feel like you have a pretty good grasp on the deity connection in a lot of ways, but you just want to kind of go deeper. Like you want to get deeper messages. You want to just experience this deity in a more like full-bodied way. Maybe you just want to learn more about how to hold things like rituals and celebrate festivals and create kind of like this routine around your theurgy, around your worship and devotion to a deity. And so these are kind of like three categories that I've brought to the table around personalizing the connection, really connecting with a timeline or a schedule of connection, routine, having like go-to rituals that you do and whatnot, and then just the idea of interacting with them on a deeper level, psychically connecting with them on a deeper level, getting more messages from them, getting more clear messages from them, whatever that looks like. So it's like personal relationships, timeline and schedules and routines, and just connection in general. So today in this podcast episode, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on connection and just that piece about like how to relationally come into a closer relationship with your deities, how to connect with them deeper. I pulled a tarot card before I recorded this episode, and I pulled the Two of Cups, which I was like, oh my gosh, that's like exactly what we're talking about. Like the relationship, right? Is it still on top of the deck? Yes. Look at this. It's so cute. Two of Cups. Oh my gosh. If you're watching on YouTube, here it is from the Mermaid Tarot. But anyway, so we're going to be talking about connection and relational stuff. If you are interested in going deeper with me in this topic, if you are somebody who really resonates with this idea of wanting to connect deeper with your deity at this time or forge a stronger relationship, then you definitely want to check out my Deity Workshop that I'm hosting on April 26th. It's happening on a Saturday afternoon at 12 p.m. Eastern. There is going to be a replay available as well after the event if you can't come live. But the Deity Workshop is titled From Disconnected to Secure in Pagan Deity Relationships. And we're going to be talking all about those two things that we're not going to cover today. So like creating a personal relationship, creating schedules and go-to routines and rituals with the deity, as well as talking about this idea and really like workshopping this idea in your practice around how to go from feeling disconnected or having like moments of disconnection or months or years of disconnection to feeling really secure in the relationship and like you can weather any storm essentially in your deity work connection. I always say that deity work is very similar to just like any type of relationship in your life. There's obviously differences, and we're going to even talk about some of those in this episode, but it is very similar to a lot of relationships. So if you're somebody who like struggles with certain relationship styles or attachment styles, or maybe there are certain patterns that you've noticed in relationships with other people, whether that be like friends, family, partners, romantic relationships, those can show up in deity relationships. And that's kind of what I mean from like going from disconnected to secure. Is part of that process is identifying those things and recognizing those and working to, specifically in the deity work practice, kind of dismantle those things so you can move on and have those deeper connections. So that is happening in the Patreon Coven tier. You can also buy a drop-in ticket to this event if you just want to come to this event and not be a patron, but you can find all the information for that in the show notes. I think the first thing when you are trying to connect on a deeper level to your deities is being aware of what your devotional purpose is. So this is a term that I use often when I talk about deity work. You might have heard me use it before, but essentially what the devotional purpose is like the long-term joint goal of the relationship. Sometimes the devotional purpose has to do with what the deity rules over or signifies, or some of the lessons of that deity. Like maybe for Aphrodite, the devotional purpose between you and Aphrodite specifically could be about something like love or something like self-confidence, since she rules over those things. However, it could also be something totally unrelated that deity feels like they want to assist you with or help you with. So maybe you're working with, like Aphrodite for an example, and you kind of create or figure out or delineate that there's a joint goal in the relationship around wanting to like change your career or something. And maybe the career is Venusian, and that's sort of the link. Maybe it's unrelated, but it's essentially like a joint goal that you have. That's something that deity feels like they can teach you and come in with and help you with, and something that you might need at that time. The devotional purpose is something that typically changes over time, and it's something that I feel like is pretty obvious at the beginning of a pagan deity connection, and it can kind of become diluted, or it can change really like throughout the relationship, and then you kind of get confused as to like, oh, well, when I first started working with Aphrodite, she was helping me overcome this breakup, and now I don't really know what we're doing because I'm over the guy, So the devotional purpose, like the deeper purpose, right, is, okay, she came into your life to help you through this breakup, to kind of help you through one of the lessons of love. Now maybe, and as you grow in the relationship, maybe the devotional purpose changes where it's similar, it's about the mysteries of love that she rules over, but you're navigating it with her in a slightly different way. Or maybe it changes entirely and she wants to teach you something totally different, or she wants to walk with you in a different way. Maybe she came in really strongly as a teacher and like a mentor, and now she wants to kind of come in a little bit more like a friend. Or maybe she's coming in with like that lover energy and archetype, right? So this is what can happen as deity relationships change. And I talk to a lot of pagans and they're like, yeah, I was really solid with my practice like the first year or the first couple months because I felt like I knew why they were coming into my life and like what that was all about. But then I kind of like lost the plot. Or maybe it's like the opposite where you find out a little bit more about why they're in your life later on. And until then, you're feeling a little bit lost about like what to do or how to navigate things. So again, the devotional purpose is something that can change over time. I think there's like a deeper kind of purpose that is more encompassing of your relationship generally, like love for Aphrodite, and it typically has to do with something that the deity rules over. However, again, you can have like smaller micro lessons around love that mark certain times of your life, certain times of your deity's life. So that is one of my first tips, is to think about this idea of devotional purpose. Ask yourself if it resonates with you. Ask yourself what this could look like for your deity. I have certain deity relationships where the deity came in very strongly, being like, I want to help you with this thing. Like, I'm here and I'm here right now for this reason. So if that happened to you, if you feel like you have a pretty good awareness about like why that deity came into your life, usually it sort of has to do with them explaining the timeline of their entrance into your life. Then write that down and mark that down, because that is likely your current devotional purpose, and there might even be a deeper layer there that can help explain the more overarching themes of your relationship. But having that, knowing that, and working from that is important, because then you can kind of go off in so many directions with that information. If you don't know what this looks like for you, if you haven't gotten this information before, but you kind of still resonate with this idea and would like to work with this idea, something I really recommend is actually like inviting the deity to reveal this to you. And this is my next tip, which is just about telling your deity and talking to your deity about the things that you're experiencing, what you need from them. And this is all about allowing the deity permission to enter your life, to place their hands in your life. There's been so many situations with Hades where he has told me that he was just waiting for me to tell him about a situation, or was waiting for me to invite him to assist me with something before he came in. And sometimes it's like literally he was not aware of something going on in my life, because deities are not like most pagan deity, it really depends on like the mythology or the worldview or like the theological view of that specific deity or tradition. But generally speaking, pagan deities are not seen as omnipresent or omnipotent. Like maybe like Helios or Nyx or something, you know, you could see them as omnipresent in the daytime and the nighttime. But a deity like Hades does not feel omnipresent to me. That's not sort of how I experience his energy. I think because I'm a devotee of him and I've worked with him for a long time, I can call upon his energy really, really seamlessly. So sometimes it feels like he's always walking with me, and I think he is in a lot of ways. Like I think that there's a part of him or a part of his energy that is kind of like with me all the time, because of the rituals and dedications that I've done with him. But he still needs to be invited. He's like Nosferatu. He still needs to be invited to assist me on certain things. Trust me, like sometimes he will come in on his own if he really sees an opportunity. But when I think back on the majority of the moments where I really felt like Hades was coming in strongly, it's because I asked him to, or it's because I invited him to, or I went to him and was like, hey, I'm having this problem. Like, can you help? Like, what can we do about this together? And we, you know, came together around it. I remember there was a guy that I was dating a couple of years ago, and I really wanted to get out of the relationship, but I just didn't like feel like I could. Like there was like a lot going on there. There was like power dynamic stuff. There was like an age gap. Like I just didn't really feel super confident. I was like living with him, you know, like there was a lot of things there. And I asked Hades and another deity to assist me in kind of just like getting the strength to leave this connection and leave this relationship. And it really wasn't until I asked them for help that I felt them come through. And it makes sense. Like you petition them, you ask them for help, they're going to come in with that help, you know? But I think at the time I was almost expecting Hades to just show up and be like, you're in this shitty relationship, let's get you out of it. Like, I think that sometimes that's how we think it's gonna go. And sometimes that does happen, you know, but most of the time, it's like I had to ask for it. I had to invite it. And I really like that about deity work and in worship is I like that there's almost this co-creation, you know? Again, there's these like shared experiences, these shared goals, this co-creation, this co-assistance. And so make sure that you're actually being communicative with your deity about what's going on. You might think you are, you might think you're telling everybody in your life about what's going on, but like, have you actually gone to the altar or wherever you meet with your deity or, you know, however you evoke them and connect with them? Have you gone to their altar and done that? Told them about it? You know, sometimes I like to do this in the form of poetry. Like I'll write a poem about the situation and then I'll read the poem to Hades and I'll give him like the TLDR of like what's going on in the situation and whatnot. Sometimes I ask him to help me. Sometimes I just tell him what's happening so he can kind of be informed and like monitor the situation. You know what I mean? Something else around the same idea is like making sure that you're asking your deities for signs, or if you want to have a dream about a deity, you know, ask them to communicate with you in your dreams. It doesn't always mean that it's going to end up happening, but just stating that you are setting intention for something or that you are ready for something or you desire to have experiences in a certain way with that deity is going to help. It's kind of like when you tell your partner that you want to go to the restaurant that just opened, you know, like the likelihood of you now going to the restaurant with your partner is so much higher than if you were just waiting for them to be like, hey, do you want to go to that new restaurant? You know? And so that's the same thing with deities. Like just tell them how you want to connect with them. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but at least they have this information. They know what's going on. They know how you would like to communicate with them. When I first was trying to connect with my spirit guides, I just kind of set intention that I was going to connect with them. And I'll share the ritual that I did because I think this can totally be applied to deities, and maybe I'll even make a reel about this because I'm like remembering this ritual and I was like, that was a good idea. The people are going to love this one. So what I did is I wanted to connect with my spirit guides. I wanted to learn who they were, who, was coming through for me. I just learned about the concept of spirit guides. I was like a teenager still at this time. So I went to downtown Salem and I picked out a crystal that reminded me of the spirit guide. And again, like I didn't know who they were, but I just like intuitively chose a crystal based off of them. And from the crystal and like what it is and the properties of it, I was going to like do some delineation like later on like who the guide might be or what they might be trying to tell me. And then I took that crystal and I meditated with it, and then I slept with it under my pillow, and I like set the intention that I was going to connect with a spirit guide. And literally that night that I did this, it was like a 24-hour turnaround time, right? That night that I did this, I had a super visceral dream about a spirit guide who came into my dream and was like, hey, I'm your spirit guide. This is my name. It was actually two guides. It was like one main guide who's also a deity, so that's why I said deity. He's like a lesser god in the Greek mythology. And he was like, hey, I'm one of your guides, and this is another one of your guides, and I met them both. And it was one of the most vivid, visceral dreams I've ever had. It was so cool. And I just remember thinking like, wow, look at that. How easy, So honestly, I think that sometimes with deities or spirit guides or whoever you're trying to connect with, like they want to connect with you. They're just waiting for that invitation. They're waiting to be invited. And this is true even when you know who they are. Like they're just wanting you to tap in. It's kind of like a channel. Like they want you to log on. They want you to tune the radio to that frequency. And they want to know like how you'd actually like to communicate with them. Another thing to remember or to consider when it comes to deity connections and like messages from deity is that deities are not like bound by time and space in the ways that we are. So sometimes we're expecting like immediately a deity to show up in like, let's say you did a ritual like that and you expect that night that deity is now going to come into your dream. That could happen. Like I just was talking about how that's a good idea and it could happen, right? So I'm not like saying that you shouldn't do that. But sometimes what will happen is it's not going to happen immediately. And then you're going to be like, oh, the deity doesn't want to hang out with me. Or like, what am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. Deities are just operating on a different level. You know what I mean? Like they're not bound by time the way that we are. They're not like, wow, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. They are not really thinking like that. I think they can think like that. I think they have the potential to work with our understanding of how the world works and how time and reality works, but they're on a different level. So we can't expect them to immediately respond when we ask them to respond, right? Or if you feel like you've had a moment of disconnection from a deity and you feel really discouraged, that might not be the way that your deity is viewing the situation. Or let's say like you didn't go to the altar for a long time and you're saying to yourself like, oh my gosh, this deity must be so mad at me. They must be so upset. Like, I don't want to approach them because I don't want to like piss them off. Like I hear this all the time and I've experienced this as well. That it's not always the case though, that your deity is going to be upset by time passing and there's, no connection being had, because your deity might not be thinking about time in the way that you do. You know what I mean? I think if you have said to them like, hey, I'm going to show up at your altar every single day, and then you don't, that could be kind of seen as like, okay, well, you made this pact with me, or you said you were going to do this and you didn't, right? So like that's a whole different thing. But if there's never been like an agreement around something and you just start feeling bad, or you start feeling like the deity doesn't care about you because you're not feeling the reciprocal relationship, I just want you to remember that time might not be existing in the way that it is for you for that deity. What I'm talking about is the idea of like divine timing. And you've probably heard divine timing in a lot of contexts of like, wow, this thing just happened and it was perfect and I didn't expect it to, but it was just super aligned. You might have also experienced the phenomenon of like randomly a deity gives you a message that's super visceral and you're like, oh my gosh, like what did I do to elicit that? Like that was crazy. That is just the deity coming in their divine timing on their own timeline into the connection. And it might be a response to something that you've done in the past, like months prior that you completely forgot about. It might be related to something that's going on right now in your life. There's so many reasons why there could be like lapses in the relationship or periods of disconnection. And they're not always telling you that something's wrong and you need to switch gears. Sometimes, in my experience, it's literally just about the difference in how time and reality works between you and a deity. It's kind of like when you're in a different time zone and you're like texting your friend on WhatsApp because they're international and they're like 10 hours ahead of you and you just can never seem to like respond to each other, or like then they start texting you through like Instagram Messenger or something because they just are not getting your WhatsApps and you're just like, whatever, I'll just talk to them when they come back. Like, I don't know if that's ever happened to you. It's like a very specific situation, I guess. But that's kind of what communicating with deities can be like sometimes. And it doesn't mean that anything's wrong or that you need to like get on their timeline. It's just sometimes what happens. So I just wanted to put that out there. And when you feel like the divine timing really coming in and a deity is like hot in your life, that could be a really great time or like a peak moment for you to do ritual with that deity or to, rekindle the connection or to talk to the deity about the last couple of months of your relationship. So sometimes you are leading things and then sometimes the deity is leading things. And sometimes like nobody's leading anything and it's just people having a connection, and sometimes the calls aren't always going through, or sometimes, you go a couple of weeks or months without chatting because they're, like across the globe from you or in a different, in a different realm than you. And that's okay. I find that in the wintertime, I don't always feel Hades' energy as strongly in my life because I think he's just busy. Like he's just having fun with Persephone. It's his time. He's got plenty of things to do. It's all just a really busy time for me, for him, whatnot, right? So sometimes like right after the spring equinox when Persephone rises, I almost like feel his energy like coming back into our relationship in a really powerful way, and it kind of marks this like cyclical change in how I'm going to experience his energy. It doesn't happen every year, and it can definitely change and ebb and flow, but that's just something that I've noticed generally over the last like 10 winters that I've been a Hades devotee. One thing that I really want you to remember about deity work, especially when you're feeling inadequate or like you have imposter syndrome about the connection, or you just don't feel like you're doing it right, whatever is like stopping you from connecting to that deity, I want you to remember that the point of deity work is to feel connected to the divine, feel connected to yourself as a member of this earth, like thinking about yourself as part of the divine, thinking of the divine as a reflection of you. Something that I love about paganism in particular as like a spiritual belief system is that there's such a multiplicity of personalities in paganism. Like there's so many different types of deities, and some of them are really nice and some of them are like malefic and some of them are like trickster gods and they're kind of in between. And it really like shows me that we are also reflections of that. Like I can see my personality in some of the deities that I work with or some of the deities in general of like Greek mythology or Roman mythology that I, prefer to engage with. And it really just makes me feel better about myself. It gives me confidence. It just really like helps me understand myself and my fate as like a member of the world, as a child of earth and starry sky, when I have such a variety of divine archetypes to look up to. If you know what I mean, right? Like Saturn in his malefic nature is divine, Venus in her benefic nature is divine, and you can kind of be in between, and you can also be involved. And this kind of draws upon like what we were talking about last week with Gaia, and I really resonate with the idea from Greek mythology that we are from Gaia, like we are from her bones, we are from her blood. And it just reminds me, like, not only are we of the divine, but we are of the earth, and that's the point. That's the whole point. Okay, right? This is the whole point. So it's really like a disservice to yourself and to you getting closer to that idea, which is the whole point of 3rd. It's a disservice to you to feel like your deity is going to be upset with you, or feel like you are not doing it right, or feel like other people or other devotees are doing it better than you or are more special than you. Like, that is a disservice to the entire idea of like why you're even working with the gods, No matter what your worldview is, it's about connection. And so when you are feeling really disconnected, when you are feeling like completely inadequate around it, I want you to put it into perspective that it's okay for you, it's safe for you to like let those things go and just connect. It's like the guy in some dating app or whatever who's like, I just don't want to commit right now, and you're like, what the hell? Like, you are preventing yourself from having a really solid relationship. That's kind of like what you're doing when you're like, I just don't feel like this deity likes me, or whatever, like I don't feel like I'm doing a good enough job. You're the guy on Hinge that has like taken you on 3 dates and now doesn't want to commit. Maybe the guy on Hinge is doing it for more insidious reasons than what I'm, trying to propose, but like maybe he just feels really insecure. Maybe he just generally like doesn't feel like he has relationship skills, and he doesn't want to string you on like at the best, And I know that that's kind of where you're approaching it from, where you're thinking like, I just want to be the best I can for this deity, but I keep having to work late hours and I keep having to miss, certain like holidays and stuff like that. And so you're like, I don't have these skills yet. I haven't created these deity work skills or these skills on how to navigate connection, or how to navigate, imposter syndrome or disappointment or any of these things in regards to the relationship with your deities. But the whole point is to build those skills and practice them and say, you know what, I'm going to put whatever I'm feeling aside right now to just sit at the altar with my deity, even if the altar's kind of dusty, even if there's resistance to you being there, whatever it is. Or I'm going to go actually clean or dust off my altar, and I'm going to work through the stuff that is preventing me from doing this. Like, treat the resistance that you're feeling and working through that as an offering to the deities. You know what I mean? Like, that, they love that shit. They want you to do hard things. Deities want to watch you do hard things. They want to guide you through those things. And so sometimes this happens inside of the connection. And that's something else, is like, your deities are not only going to teach you the lessons that are related to their themes and their mysteries and their rulerships and your devotional purpose and shared goals, they're also going to teach you about how relationships work. And they're going to challenge how you approach relationships. That's like something huge that I've learned about deities over time, is like, it is a relational thing. It is you and a force, and they are making you recognize things about yourself. And some of that has to do with how you show up in relationships. So this is part of the process. The last thing that I wanted to talk about in this episode is about allowing your deities to speak and communicate with you in the way that they want to. So we talked a lot about like you inviting them in and that sort of thing. And this is kind of a separate, I see this as like a separate thing. What I mean by allowing the deities to speak is that sometimes in deity work. We go, okay, I'm going to pull a tarot card from this god, or I'm going to, maybe you have like a specific deck that you always use, or maybe you always tend to communicate with a deity in a certain way, and this is just like a habit that you've built over time or something, like a go-to way of connecting with them. Allow the deities to speak and give you messages in whatever way that they want to. Don't like fill in your mind what you think they're trying to say to you. Like, don't like, I see this happening a lot of the times with deities, especially people who've worked with their god for a long time and like they just feel really like they kind of know what the deity has been saying to them historically. You still have to kind of lean back and like let that deity give you the actual message that they want to give you. So, for example, I used to use a tarot deck with Hades for like a very long time. And we had like a kind of patch of disconnection in our relationship a couple of years ago for many reasons. And he told me like, Angelica, I actually don't want to communicate with you in this way anymore. Like, I think the way that you are interpreting certain cards in this deck is kind of diluting or like almost like pigeonholing some of the messages that I'm trying to give you. Like, you're not like listening to what I'm actually trying to say. You're just like reading tarot cards, you know? Or like you're not like actually hearing me. And it was such a shock because I was like, you know, I'm a professional tarot card reader. I'm a professional diviner. Like, I know how to psychically connect with deities. I know how to psychically connect with, you know, lots of different entities. And he was basically just saying to me, like, you're not actually letting me give you the message. You're almost like filling it in your head, or like you're pulling a card and you're like, this is what Hades has to say. And he was like, I want you to work more with me and like come to the altar, do more meditations, do more trance journeying, do more like sleep and dream messages. And he's like, I just want to work with you like without tools. That's kind of what he was saying. Like without tarot, without playing cards, without pendulums. Like, I just want to build up this connection with you. I also, this is not my personal story, but I have a friend who has like a silence practice with their deities. And this is something that I totally would do in the future. I just, you know, haven't done it. And this is kind of their experience with it. But they have this silence practice where like once a week or however often they will go to the altar and they will just like sit in complete silence for, you know, a considerable time with their deities. And they're not trying to connect. They're not trying necessarily to like get a psychic message. The whole point is like, hey, I'm here with you and I'm donating my time. So I'm just gonna like sit in this chair in front of the altar and, you know, look out the window and like hear the birds. And it's this silence practice and like this stillness practice. And they say to me sometimes like the craziest, most amazing messages that they've ever gotten from their deity that are so specific, or the moments where they've like clairaudiently like heard their deity, is through this silence practice. Like, they're not trying to push anything. They're not like even asking a question. They're just like, I'm here if you would like to talk. And I'm just going to sit here for 20 minutes until the timer goes off and just be with you and donate my time to you. So what I'm saying about like letting your deities speak is that sometimes the reason why you're having trouble connecting with them is that you're almost like leading the charge of like how you think you ought to communicate with them. And they're like, actually, let's do this in a different way. Let's do rituals together. Let's do this. Let's read tarot cards together if you don't do that already, right? Like, they might want to switch up the way that you communicate or just spend time together. Like, this can also just be about switching things up in the connection from time to time to keep things going, keep things fresh. Like, that's another way that you could think about it. And I know I've been giving a lot of like examples in relationships of some of these things that I'm saying, but I think it's helpful, at least for me. I think the examples are helpful. So it's kind of like if you have this routine with a friend where like for 3 years you've gone to a coffee shop every Friday morning, and maybe like you love that routine and you're like, that's a great routine, but you're like, but I also want to like see you outside of the coffee shop. or like I want to go to this coffee shop instead of that one. Like I know there's some people in my life and in my family members' lives where they've like, I know people who have had friends since high school essentially, and they do the same exact thing every single time they hang out. And I'll talk to them and, they'll be like, yeah, like, I wish we could switch it up every once in a while, but I just don't even know how to like approach the topic with this person because we've literally been doing this since high school, Or like maybe even another good example is, let's say you always talk to your friend about something in particular. Like you're always talking about your relationship with your friend or a shared experience that you two had. And you feel like you can never get past talking about this like safe topic. Both of these things, all of these things can happen in your deity work relationships. And sometimes your deities just want to kind of push the envelope and try new things and connect in different ways. And that's what I mean by like allowing your deities to really speak, allowing them to come in, allowing them to suggest things. So as you are leading in certain areas of the relationship, allow them the space to be able to tell you if they need something, if they want to change something, if they want to suggest something. And a lot of the times you actually have to like allow them that space and donate your time to them and give them this opportunity to let you know how you want the connection to change, right? So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it helped you come up with some ideas of how you can create stronger connections with your deities. And I hope to see you in my deity workshop or, get the replay if you can't come live, because we're going to be going so much deeper. We're going to be doing some journal prompts. We're going to be like workshopping your relationships with deities in order to cultivate deeper relationships. And we're going to talk a little bit more about personalizing the connection. And we're going to cover how to create a really solid routine that honors your goals and your schedules and your needs with the deity in our deity workshop that's happening on April 26th. And that event is happening in the Coven tier of my Patreon, or you can access it just by buying a drop-in ticket to the event specifically. Speaking of my patrons, I wanted to give a shout out to my Diary and Coven tier members. So thank you so much to Jamie, Cheryl, Emma, Alexis, Alessandra, Ashley, Luna, Taylor, Jordan, Chelsea, Megan A, Megan M, Natalie, Jen, Lauren, Kayla, Lindsay, Sarah, Quinn, Peony, Joanna, Megan S, Megan R, Callie, Nina, Irene, Chelb, Haley, Kristen, Desiree, Emmy, Hannah, Georgia, Adri, Liz, Kay, Esty, Kristen, Shell, Veronica, Isabella, Lanes, Junie, Elena, Teddy, Paige, Shania, Crystal, Mina, Kimberly, Finian, Barbie, Lucy, Amber, Madeline, Katie, Laura, Orja, Lara, and my newest member, Pam. Thank you so much for being patrons. Thank you for listening and for watching, and we will talk very soon. Bye.